На трибунах аллеют знамена, облака в поднебесье плывут. На зеленом ковре стадиона разноцветные майки цветут.
Hello and welcome back to the Russian Football News Podcast. There's another international break this week, but we're finally getting towards the end of it. Russia played the remaining 2 World Cup qualifying games against Slovenia with a 2-1 win in Sochi, and then travelled to Slovakia to only lose 2-1 away from home. A certain Khvicha Kvaratskhelia also tore up the internet and Twitter in particular this week with a goal against Spain and some overall fantastic performances for Georgia in their relevant World Cup qualifiers. The Russia under-21s unfortunately crashed out of the under-21 European Championships with 2 disappointing results, a 2-0 loss to France and then a 3-0 thrashing by Denmark. And finally, Nikolai Larin has also stood down as a director from Chertanovo. We'll be covering that all, and to do so is David Sanson.
Good evening, James.
And Richard Pike.
Good evening, James. How are we all?
I must admit, I'm glad we've got to the end of the international break. I know a lot of people out there really enjoy it, and there's some online have tried to start like a resurgence and a renaissance of like bring back the international break and like bring back the respect for it. But to be honest, I'm just glad it's ended. It's a complete waste of 2 weeks, and I wish it would go away. Anyway, Richard, you kept a keen eye on some of Russia's games. How do you think that they played in the good win over Slovenia and then bad loss to Slovakia?
Well, having watched both games, I'm going to isolate the performance aspect of both and the results aspect of both. I would say, having watched both games, that in terms of performance, it was sort of a 50-50 international break for Russia's senior team. If you take away the results of both games, analysed the performance, I thought second halves of both the Slovenia and Slovakia game were overall probably, in terms of standard, probably between decent and good. Second half against Slovenia was probably the best performance of the 2 games. In the first half of the game, I thought Russia were a little bit lucky to go in at half-time leading. Slovenia, created a good few chances. And, with the exception of the 2 goals scored by Dzyuba, Russia didn't really create that many chances themselves. However, I will credit them the second half of that match against Slovenia, though. They limited Slovenia to very, very few second half opportunities overall, and they could have won by more than the 1-goal margin of victory. Although the first half performance against Slovakia was very poor. Generally little creative spark from the team. That goal that they conceded to was poor defending from a corner, and you can't give a quality central defender like Milan Skriniar, you can't leave him free in the box to head home like he did. I'd say Russia improved after the break in the Slovakia game, and to be fair, there was little that they could do with the Robert Mack goal. I will give Robert Mack credit, the ex-Zenit player. I will give him a lot of credit for his goal. It was a lovely dribbling run and a finish from him. And he had a good game overall, Robert Mack, I thought. And after that eventual Slovak winner that Mack scored, Russia pushed forward, but didn't really create enough chances to get at least a point from that game. They didn't really look too menacing. More needed really to be done to break down a Slovakia defence. And, when you've got a terrific player like Skriniar at the heart of it, I watch a lot of Serie A in addition to the RPL, and Skriniar has been brilliant this season for Inter Milan. And that was that. And, there's 2 ways of analysing the international break, I guess, from Spornaja's perspective and from Stanislav Cherchesov's perspective too. On the one hand, you could say, it's been a funny international break overall. We only have to look at the shock result from last night with North Macedonia beating Germany in Germany. And there's been a few other shock results too. And we've also got to remember as well that international managers generally can't produce the same high caliber displays as club managers, as they have, a lot less time with the players than those in the club game get. And also in recent international breaks, we've been cramming 3 games into the schedule too, so there's even less time to train your players between the games. So, I'll still defend any international manager, including Cherchesov, to an extent there. I'm also a bit puzzled looking at it from an England perspective too, at how much criticism someone like Gareth Southgate's been getting. I think some of it's been over the top in my opinion, but it's sometimes international managers get a little bit unfairly criticised. But however, on the flip side of the argument, not only for Russia recently have results not been great by Cherchesov, but the performances haven't been good either. I'd probably say the turning point for Cherchesov really was that October international break when Russia had those 2 Nations League games at home. I think it was against Turkey and Hungary, and drew them both. And that was a golden chance to put themselves in a prime position to win their Nations League group. And I just think since those 2 results, it's really all just fallen off a cliff since then. Some of his call-ups continue to baffle, even though I thought this squad was better than some of the squads he's picked in the past. The performances haven't been great. The results have not been great either. The Serbia game was an abomination. Very mixed performances from this international break. The squad's starting to get a bit stagnant now, and it hasn't really been refreshed. And I've got to admit now, even I'm getting a little bit worried now with Russia. I'm beginning to wonder now if it might be the time for a new face in charge after the Euros. For Spornair to move on from Stani. It's starting to get a little bit stale now at the moment, and I've got to admit I'm a little bit less confident now going into the Euros this summer and the rest of the World Cup qualification campaign as I was maybe this time 6, 7, 8 months ago. I'm starting to get a little bit sceptical about Russia's chances of making the knockouts of the Euros now and making the Qatar World Cup, I have to admit. So, it's a huge next tournament for this huge next competitive bunch of games for Stani at the Euros. We've got to start seeing more from this team.
Of course, this set of games did see the return of Aleksandr Golovin in midfield. He's been injured and in and out of the team for Monaco and France this year, but in Ligue 1 he has grabbed 7 assists and 4 goals in just 14 games and been earning some rave reviews for when he is playing. How do you think he played, Richard, in these 3 games?
I think when you watch Golovin, you can tell the class aspect of, you can tell he plays in a top 5 league, and the caliber of opponents, even, I think with his injuries, they've been easing him back into the side. I also think it's important to remember as well that Niko Kovac does tend to play 2 strikers with Monaco. I listen to a few French football podcasts, and, Wissam Ben Yedder and Kevin Volland play up front for Monaco. So they play a 2 striker formation. So sometimes they're very, very, they don't always play Golovin. They have to strike the right balance between attack and defence, of course, like any manager does. But even when he's not been starting all the time for Monaco, you can still tell with Golovin he's been getting assists in games. He got that hat-trick I think it was about a month ago. And you can still tell, even though he's not been a regular all season for Monaco, you can tell when he plays for Spornair, his touch, his movement off the ball, his overall getting involved with play, it is far higher, and you can tell he's exposed to a higher caliber of opponent every week. So, I think his class still shines through. I think Golovin and it was the same during this international break. So I thought he played quite well in some of the games, but Russia's got to ultimately start producing more players like Golovin, and we've got to start seeing probably a few more Russian players start going abroad to get that exposure against a higher caliber of opponent. Now, I'm a bit disappointed how it's fallen a bit flat with Miranchuk this season at Atalanta. I'm sort of hoping that, people will look at Golovin and generally when he has played for Monaco, how successful he's been when judging whether or not to go into the market to buy Russian players and not just look at the Miranchuk example. It is a bit of a shame that it's not quite worked out there for him in his first season. Hopefully second season he'll come back after the Euros this summer and have a good season at Atalanta. But you can tell Golovin's got the class when he plays for Russia. We just need to surround him with more class, I think.
Yeah. And lots of journalists have really put Cherchesov under pressure from these spate of results. Obviously, these disappointing performances and mixed team selections do go further back. But the standard of coaching, I think, is just not good enough at this level. David, what do you think? Do you think that Stani's really on borrowed time right now? Or do you think he's going to stay in the role for quite some time going ahead?
Well, I remember last year we did a pod and I said I thought he would be here until after the Euros. I don't think we'll see a change till after the Euros. And we've seen Russia in general, not just at senior, but they like to keep a project and they like to keep it stable. That's why we've seen all the under-21s groups stay the same rather than a lot of them being used in the seniors. I think they may well look to replace him after the Euros. Squad and team selection and management at a lot of Russian levels, internationally and club, has always been a bit suspect and, potentially not at the best level. I felt bad for Alexander Mostovoy, who, Andrew Mostovoy, right? I always get those two names mixed up for him. I think he got subbed on and subbed off in the same match on 2 occasions over the break. Certainly against Slovakia, he was subbed on half time and then was subbed off later on to make way for Sobolev. Rather than bringing off like another defender, they took off a bright attacking winger to make room for a second big striker to stick in the box, which I found a baffling decision, to be quite honest. So yeah, he probably is on borrowed time. I wonder if he sort of already knows that it could be his last hurrah and his last run in. I said last week that we give him some leniency with his squad with the under-21s going on. It is disheartening still to see Yuri Chertanovo playing every week, like Samoshnikov and Dupin. Samoshnikov didn't even get on the bench for any of the 3 fixtures, despite our excitedness at him being called up, which was disappointing. It's just the same old. Every few, however many weeks it is, every 6 to 8 weeks that we get an international break, it's just it doesn't feel like there's going to be any excitement from the Russian team as much. I'm sort of with you in terms of international football. I never get too excited by it. But with the squad that was picked, obviously we got Golovin and Miranchuk back. Miranchuk barely played. I should also add this break. He barely got on the pitch. It was good to have Golovin in there. You'd like to have Cheryshev back if he can ever get fit again. Bursting down the wing, give us a proper left-footed winger that would hopefully mean no more Yuri Chertanovo playing, because he's not even playing left back half the time. He's playing on the wing, which is even worse. So there's a lot of things that come together. But if Cheryshev isn't available, we need other options that aren't a 37-year-old Chertanovo. So yeah, I think he'll stay for the Euros and then he'll be gone. Obviously, we're not getting onto it yet, but obviously the under-21s will be available for the next squad selection. They're not going to be busy in the summer. So the next squad, maybe we will see some excitement going on. Will we see Diveyev, Yevgeny? We've got a few of them did get caps. In that the Serbia game, which we don't talk about. Diveyev and Yevgeniev both played. Obviously, Lesovoy had call-ups but didn't get a cap yet. I'm sure Obliakov will be around. Chelov maybe will be included. Will we see someone like Makarov and Samoshnikov sneak in on form again? Samoshnikov was fully free to play this time. Dupin as well he could have played anyone in goal that first game, but Shunin played every single game. There's just no willingness to experiment, it seems like. And obviously, in general, it's a decent start to the group. You take 2 wins. Obviously, Croatia had a slip up. Slovenia had a slip up. Didn't Slovakia also have a slip? It's one of the tightest groups. I think there's 3 or 4 teams on 6 points in there right now. So it's not ideal in that sense. But they've come out of it with obviously 2 wins. A loss against one of the rivals isn't ideal, but it feels like at this point this group is going to be very tight. And it certainly seems like the home games are going to be the ones that they're going to try and capitalise on. And maybe Cyprus will be able to, spring some surprises. Croatia, who were the top seeds, right, don't seem like they're going to be storming away like the other top seeds in the other groups will. And this group will be interesting because you've got Slovenia, Slovakia. Slovenia obviously have been at World Cups in the Euros. Slovakia at the Euros obviously beat Russia famously in Euro 2016. Croatia, obviously, we've got history of them in the World Cup too. So, there's 4 teams there who are competitive at international tournaments in the last decade. So it will be a tight group, and you'd have probably preferred a point. It was not a great game from what I saw of Russia Slovakia. Very uninspiring. I mean, the defending for the first goal was comical. But yeah, we just want to get past it now. I mean, we've got past that bit, and this was the better of the two international bits in the last 7 days as well, and we're still a bit depressed. So let's just get on with it and carry on, I suppose.
I mean, when you take the results in isolation, look at the standings. I mean, it's currently Croatia top with 6 from 3, then Russia with 6 from 3, Slovakia with 5 from 3, then Cyprus with 4 from 3, and then Slovenia with 3 from 3. It is a very tight group, like you said, David. I mean, Cyprus surprised everyone with the 1-0 victory over Slovenia, and Slovenia also beat Croatia. So Slovenia lost against Cyprus but beat Croatia. So it's going to be a very strange group this year. But, I mean, and Russia's results on paper were all right. Weren't particularly ideal, but considering how tight it is, they were fine. The problem I have and why I'm so down about it is just the nature of the wins, the nature of the performances was very dull, very pedestrian. And I don't think Dzyuba's now 1 away from the record from Level and Kherzhakov. Absolutely deserves it. He's been an excellent servant for his country, for his club, and so on. But Dzyuba's just not at that level. I liked an article that was written in Championat by... Oh, God, I can't remember who it was by. Anyway, basically he mentioned about the expectations upon the Russian national team and harkened back to a famous interview that Arshavin gave where he lamented quite heavily the high expectations on the team. That was Maxim Pakhomov who wrote it. And he was discussing how the expectations are just far too high. And people rate those in the country, rate people like Dzyuba far too highly. And I totally understand that. And he didn't just mean everyday fans or anything, but it was also the authorities. Their expectations are too high, the RFUs particularly. So
I think one of Russia's biggest problems is their over-reliance on Dzyuba. I mean, obviously, 2 goals versus Slovenia, scored one of the goals against Malta as well. But let's just say then we've got an international break at some point where we're going to play Croatia, Slovenia, Slovakia, which would be the 3 hardest games in the group. And what if Dzyuba's not fit? I feel like Russia don't really have a plan B right now. And he's only got a few more years left. There's going to be a point soon where they have to come up with a plan B and do something else. Or will they just think, right, well, we've got Sobolev, let's try it with him instead.
Exactly.
Even
without Sobolev, you've got Zabolotny as well, Komlichenko as well. It's all exactly the same type of football. It's almost as if...
We always wondered whether Chalov would actually get a chance, when he was in that good form. He obviously struggled the last couple of seasons to break through because of the prevalence of target men in the Russian system rather than smaller interplay strikers like himself.
Richard, any last words on the Russian the first team anyway for now?
Yeah, I just want to come in on there on Stani, and I personally, as I said, I agree with a large degree of what you've said all there, and also about the Dzyuba thing as well. Russia are too reliant on him, and we've just got to hope that Chalov rediscovers that form from a couple of years ago. Because a couple of years ago he was playing really well. He was being linked with the likes of Sevilla, Crystal Palace. I mean, we don't know how credible those links were, but he was getting linked with clubs abroad. And just the last 18 months, it's sort of going down a route where, as Russian football fans, we've been down before. We've even going back to Ruslan Pimenov all those years ago. It could be argued Dmitry Sichev didn't really live up to as much promise as what should have been. There was a young striker at Spartak, I think Koslov, who came on the scene very young and then faded away. I really just hoped with Chalov that this would be different and we'd get a striker who, like what you've been just saying there, who's different to, a lot of the other, the atypical Russian big man striker like Sobolev, like Dzyuba. So I just really hope Chalov, hopefully someone like Olic who's coming as Tsarnaev's new coach, can get the best out of him, because we really need a striker like that. Hopefully Chukavin will keep coming on the scene and improving at Dinamo. So yeah, because Russian football really needs a player like that. And one last thing I'll quickly go on to with Stani is that I think it probably is best after the Euros to make a change, and for Stani's sake as well, because he really gave everybody involved in the country a lift at that World Cup 3 years ago, because we were all looking at it before the World Cup and expectations were really low. No one really in Russia, even ourselves at RFN, no one really thought Russia were going to put in the kind of performances that they did. And they did really win the hearts and admiration of everybody, and especially in the nation itself. Everybody, all the players became superstars. Dzyuba, it was Dzyuba mania in the country, wasn't it? And Stani was well liked too. And the start of the Euro 2020 qualification games were good as well. It's only in the last couple of international breaks where I think it's all just in danger of getting a little bit stale. And you only have to look at Joachim Löw at Germany. He's probably arguably stayed on a bit too long in international football now, and he's decided to call it a day in the summer. So, and results again stale for them. Obviously, Germany have completely different expectations to Russia, but it's still kind of the same thing. You don't want it to get that way with Stani as well. It would be a shame if he carried on after the Euros and then they didn't qualify for the World Cup, because then the momentum that Russia got from that tournament will sort of been wasted in a way. They don't qualify for the World Cup. So I think, the summer is a good time to cut it off. And I hope, hopefully, Stani maybe even makes a bold decision to even resign after the Euros, maybe just move aside and let's have a fresh face in charge. For Stani's sake too, I don't want to see it end really badly for him, so that is important.
Yeah, hopefully. He's a storied manager with lots of success over his career. Done very well in 2018, but it does just feel like everything's stagnating a little bit right now. But if we move on to not necessarily Russia related, but certainly RPL related, for anybody who searched Twitter this week, Google, had a look on... If you look on Google, on the analytics website, it's this man's name went up 400% since this first game, and of course that is Khvicha. Now, he played against Spain, dominated the game, got a good goal, and David, you kept an eye on his performances during the entirety of the international break, I believe.
Yeah, I been a fan of his for at least a year now. It was about this time last year where he was breaking through, like making big strides in the RPL. So you can hear that car horn out there. And he had the Sweden game. He got subbed off at half time in the Sweden game. He tried his best, but apparently he'd been had come off reported feeling unwell. But then when it came to the Spain and Greece games, he scored in each game, and he was fantastic in both. He just put on classic Khvicha Kvaratskhelia performances in both. He tore Pedro Porro apart in the Spain game. I think he'd earned 2 yellow cards within the first 10 minutes of that Spain game. Got his goal, obviously, just on the stroke of half time, which wasn't even like he did. All he did was the finish. Normally, he does everything but the finish. But the play, he didn't set up any of it. The play just came straight to him. He took one touch and bang. And yeah, he had a great game against Spain. Really, really good. Spain then stepped up, and Georgia were unlucky that they conceded right at the death, and they didn't go away with a point which they may well have deserved. And that got people talking. We can describe Khvicha as a hot talent, but he's only known in certain circles, really, people who like Georgian football, people who follow Russian Premier League, and that's really it. Unless you're really on the ball, he's not in FIFA, he's not in things like that. He is obviously a football manager, and whether people know him or not is another question from that. But that, and then he had another similarly fantastic performance against Greece. I happened to be watching that with English commentary, and commentator who I don't know who it was, but he a number of times said that he was the best player on the pitch, which he was. Caused the Greek fullbacks problem all game. Another great performance, and then he did score more of a Khvicha special goal with some of that unpredictable dribbling that he does. And yeah, it seems to have really put him on the map. Really, really, really put him on the map. I think he was like the number one search player on Transfermarkt. He was getting big praise from the Spain coach Luis Enrique after the match as well. So yeah, it seems like maybe he's finally put himself on the map. And now people who don't watch the RPL suddenly know him. And it's more than he deserves, really. It's a big week in his career. I think this could be the week that really changes his career for potentially the better. Obviously, if it's going to be something that ignites interest in him and potentially a transfer. The Rubin CEO Rustam Simonov did an interview today where he said, ideally they'd want to keep hold of him next season, but they won't, stop him if everything is correct and in order and the deal is right and he wants to go. And from what we've heard from Slutsky is very adamant that wherever he goes, he has to be playing, otherwise he'll stagnate. He only works when he's playing. He only works best when he's playing every time, and he improves because of it. So the right move's important if he goes, but big break for him. That it showed that we've seen him do it in Russia, but then the words will be, but he's only done it in Russia. But then that performance against Spain sort of showed, he actually probably does have the ability to do this at a higher level. People might see his stats and say, he's only getting all these ridiculous numbers of dribbles because it's in the RPL. The defending's not that great. Well, we actually know the defending's pretty good in the RPL. Maybe not good quality, but it's very difficult to navigate.
There's a lot of it.
Yeah, basically. So yeah, the Spain performance in particular was the one that was like, man, that was his test. Can he do it on a higher level? And there's clips of him mugging off Thiago. He's tore Pedro Porro apart. It was just a very good break for him, and it was a good break for a lot of RPL internationals as well. I think you see plenty of guys scored and assisted. Katalin Karp scored. Eduard Spurtian, the Krasnodar 2 guy. He got his debut for Armenia and scored and won a penalty as they won they're top of their group with 3 wins out of 3. And he scored and assisted and won a penalty in his debut this week. So a big year for him. He was one of those guys who he actually did get an under-21 call-up, I'm pretty sure, at one stage, and has played in the Champions League for the first team when they had a load of their injuries, but committed to Armenia. Good little break for him as well. But yeah, big week for Khvicha, and looking forward to seeing what we can do for the rest of the season for my team, Rubin, obviously.
So what I'm hearing here is that it's thanks to you that you were the man who brought the
if he didn't have the faith, if he didn't have the faith that I had in him this whole time, I doubt he would have done so good against Spain. I mean, I was always worried. Like, I must admit, the game against Khimki, or was it the game? Yeah, there was a game Rubin played recently, and he just didn't seem right on the pitch. His attitude on the pitch did not seem right, and I was worried. I was thinking, oh God, maybe he's not mentally able to because the best players want to play and they want to do the best, and they're mentally strong as well as being technically good. And I was worried because he just seemed not on it at all, and I was worried, is this a turn for him? But maybe he was unwell. That's and it carried over to the Sweden game. I don't know. But he showed that there is something there and there is potential there. It's just whether anyone's going to cough up a big fee like Rubin want, 20 plus mil.
Yeah, definitely big things on the horizon. It's good to see him get that recognition as well of the form that he basically deserves, because, like you said, a player who's not on FIFA, not necessarily in an attractive league, usually just go often under the radar until very late. I mean, I even had people in WhatsApp groups, Sunderland football-related WhatsApp groups, asking who he is, knowing that I do the Russian Football News podcast, and saying like, "Oh, good's he?" Never having heard of him before, and hopefully one day I'll pronounce his name right. If I don't, I'll probably get a soundboard of just a recording of his name just to put in after Khvicha. But I'm going to move on now to the Under-21 European Championships. And Russia lost, as I mentioned at the top end of the pod, against France 2-0, and then dropped out bottom of the group with second bottom, with a 3-0 loss also against Denmark, David. It was quite a very disappointing series of results.
Yeah, I mean, the Mortal game, obviously no, not Mortal, who did they play first? The Iceland game. We discussed that last week, I'm pretty sure. Good performance, good win. But I think the more I look at how it played out, obviously the order of the fixtures, I think if Russia had started off with France or Denmark, they'd have had a lot more luck getting through, obviously. And the fact that Denmark got that win against France was the real big thorn in their side. They played okay against France, to be honest. Aside from Pasha Maslov, the first penalty not good. I mean, there were people arguing, like in the Russian media particularly, that it wasn't a penalty, the first one. And the guy did go down quite easily, but it was a penalty. Second one, it was unlucky. Like, I don't blame Maslov at all. The second one, obviously, it's just the fact that he gave away 2 penalties in, whatever it was, 10 minutes. The shot was so sliced. Granted, his arm shouldn't have been out, but the shot was so sliced, and it just happened to hit his arm that was outstretched. But other than those two things, those 2 penalties, Russia did really well to stop France from creating chances. They didn't create much clear-cut second half, but they did okay. As I was talking to one of the boys from Scatter Football who he watched over the weekend, every single game from the Euros so far, including Russia's first 2. And he said that Russia had done so much better against France than Denmark. Had held their own, whereas Denmark was smash and grab. And he was saying, he actually told me, and I'll try and find the message quick, word for word, Russia have maybe been the best team I've watched from the groups A, B, and C. And that was after the first 2 fixtures, just before Russia-Denmark, like the day before. So that gave me some optimism. I was thinking, okay, well, because we're looking at it thinking, well, it looks like they've played well here, but are we just, is that bias? But that was a neutral opinion, which was nice. But then they ruined it all against Denmark. It was a terrible performance. Denmark hit them with a quick double salvo, to use some FIFA commentary, I think, from the years gone by. Or maybe that's FM wording, but either one. He scored twice in like 2 minutes within the first 15. But they were just not on it. It was such a poorly managed game. Denmark were managed and organised so much better. They were the dominant team on the ball. It felt so much quicker. They were just pressing really well. And it just wasn't good. I mean, there were some poor performances to both the fullbacks. Tikhnezyan struggled. I don't know how he started all 3 games ahead of Krugovoy personally, who is, Tikhnezyan is one of those guys who this season for Siska he's been playing as a winger, sometimes even as a striker. He's came through the academy as a left-sided defender and wing back, but I don't think he's as good defensively as Krug. He struggled. Glebov struggled. Guruliov got the start ahead of Lesovoy, who Lesovoy had not the impact you would have thought he'd had in the first 2 fixtures, but Guruliov had less of an impact in this third game, and he managed to stay on the pitch well into the second half as well. And second half, it was like after the double goals. Honestly, it was largely a lot of Russia, but they didn't create anything clear cut at all. Denmark were very well organised in defence. Russia's final ball was really not very good at times. Makarov was good in build-up. The commentator, I remember, said, if anyone's going to do anything, it was Makarov. He was very good in build-up, but the final ball was often lacking, not just from him, but from all players. Chalov struggled, came off at half-time, having been very good in the first 2 fixtures with his interplay. Zakharyan had 2, after his first brilliant game against Iceland, had 2 not so great performances against France and Denmark. But what struck me was just how poorly managed it was. That Denmark team is not as good as... There is some experience in there. They have got some experience. I think actually the commentator had said that they were the 2 most experienced squads in the tournament in terms of caps. I think Obliakov, they said, had won his 30th cap for the under-21s on that day, and the Denmark captain, Nelson, had won his 34th, which is a lot under 21 level. Granted, obviously, they've had an extra year at it because of COVID. But that Russia team should be doing better. And it was just very poor management from Galaktionov on that last game for me. The fact that Denmark had won meant that Russia before the game, assuming that France were going to beat Iceland, which everyone assumed they would because Iceland had been roundly beaten twice already, Russia needed to win by 2 clear goals. And honestly, they never really looked like even getting one of them. And that's when you need to go out and score 2 goals. the way they would set up was not good enough. Galaktionov obviously has been talked about on here and in public as a potential successor for Stani. I always doubted that a little, just because of how he'd struggled at a senior level before with Akhmat. And honestly, some of the game management here wasn't great. That's something that we're finding with a lot of Russian coaches. Obviously, we've blamed that on Mosayev and Goncharenko and Chertanovo game management being poor. So maybe this is a wider problem with Russian coaching and the level of coaching. Denmark, by the way, their under-21 squad managed by a Spaniard rather than a Dane, which I found interesting. Potentially a reason as to why they were much better drilled than our boys. There was some good. Players did come out of this tournament with some respect. Obliakov was roundly appreciated, did well. Makarov came off pretty well in general as well. Zakharyan obviously got a lot of praise. The Scattered Boys pegged out those three, especially in the two centre halves, who were largely faultless. But yeah, disappointing one. And they're out now. Obviously, they came third in the group with 3 points. Shapi, I don't think, got a single minute. Obviously, a couple of years ago, if you'd said that Shapi would sit on the bench for all three fixtures, fully fit, you wouldn't have believed it. But that's just where he is right now, mentally and in form. But yeah, so they're out now. Come the summer, and the next under-21 selection, I think everyone bar four players is now invalid for the next under-21 selection, because you have to be born in 2000 later. So only 4 players out of the 23 went to the Euros here: Maslov, Zakharyan, Umyarov, and Tukavin. They're the only 4 who are going to be valid and eligible for the next squad selection. So all the rest are up for grabs and will be available for the senior squad come the next selection. So if Lestoy keeps his form up, will he go again to the seniors? We expect Yevgeniev and Deveyev to go. Will Obliakov surely go? If Makarov keeps up his form, does he go ahead of, say, like Mostovoy, for example? The fullbacks are some of the weakest positions in the under-21s. You wouldn't expect any of those, except maybe Krug, but for some reason he was not ahead in the picking order. Chalov had a good tournament as well. I thought personally he got subbed off early in 2 of the games, but despite he got a goal and assist in goal and 3 assists in the first game. Didn't score against France, obviously, but still had a decent performance. So we'll see how many of that team are going to take that next step up, and then we look ahead to what the next gen is. I did some searching, some digging, and the next gen on paper doesn't feel as good as this gen. Now, a lot of them, obviously, at 2000 are very young still, and we're certainly lacking in submissions, particularly in goal. It's strange how we talk about Russia's goalkeeping heritage, and there's no goalkeepers born 2000 later right now who you think, he's definitely the next first choice for the under-21s. Which is strange. I struggled. I came out with a Borisko from Baltica, who's had 1 call-up already to this level. Poletayev from Ural, who's on loan at Omsk. And I even forget the other one. That's how much I struggled to come up with 3 names. Botnar from Torpedo Moscow, who's only 19 and has played half the games for them this season. So, disappointing performances, particularly the last game. That generation, what we thought were the golden generation, I think let down by management rather than their talent. I think they were talented enough to go further, definitely. They're experienced enough, and obviously we can't just fully blame management. They're experienced players. Some of these guys have got well over 100 appearances for their clubs. But I think ultimately let down by bad coaching, and this golden generation now just slips into the midst of all the other generations past, which never succeeded as well as we hoped. So sad ending to that, really.
David, I think you could probably do a one-man podcast when it comes to under 23.
I did wonder how long I was going on for there, but I sort of
it was excellent. I was going to interject halfway through, and I thought, you know what? Oh, you're on a roll here. We're just going to leave it to you because no stone unturned. But for a little jovial break, I mean, in the immediate aftermath of the France game, of course, Maslov conceded those 2 penalties within 10 minutes. If you look at Championat ran a story covering the French newspaper coverage of the game and journalist coverage of the game. And for those who may be unaware, the French reporters are kind of infamously cruel, especially Le Quip. Look, when they do their player ratings out of 10, what most papers would give an 8, Le Quip would give a 6. They're like famously very cruel at the ratings. And if I remember correctly, have never given a 10 to anyone. One of the papers called Maslov a loser. He said it was awful. In a matter of minutes, the Russian defender ruined the whole game plan for his teammates. But straight up, just calling him a loser, and Maslov actually replied to that, and he was quite unhappy about it. And there's been a lot of people defending him, obviously, because I mean, look, these little mistakes happen. But you earmarked on why I brought this up, David, is about the coaching. Now, I've always worried about the standard of coaching at the elite level in Russia. Russia has got, in ratio, the second lowest number of coaches to players out of the major European countries, which is just a very alarming sign. It's similar to the crisis of coaching that England underwent 10 years ago, and it's because the coaching badges are far too much. They cost too much to get through, even in Russia. You see teams with coaches at the top level who still don't have the UEFA Pro license. I mean, that's UEFA's problem, not just Russia's, because of the price of it. And that filters down throughout. The lower down you go, even down to the most semi-professional of levels. I'm just not convinced the coaching is strong enough. If you look at these players, Maslov made the same a very similar mistake twice in 10 minutes. And how often do we speak about players at this age saying, oh, they're very good, very highly rated, could be good if, or they are good, but they sort out these mistakes. I mean, Maximenko constantly has the same thing. His shot stopping, second to none. Distribution, excellent. It's whenever there's something that he has to think about for a long time, like the famous Rykov goal in the Spartak Dynamo derby a couple of years ago, when it was that long 40, 50-yard shot that Maximenko had it the whole way and then kind of fumbled it into his net, constantly making these big errors. And it does come down to, for me, a lack of coaching. The coaches don't have the ability or wherewithal to coach these players out of these constant issues, because look, they're only young. You don't want to get on at them for making these mistakes too often, otherwise you'll just crumble the confidence. And when you look at the current national team, I mean, only 4 of these, as you said, David, will be eligible for the under-21s after this tournament. A lot of them already aren't, but because of COVID and because of when the qualifiers started, they allowed anyone from January 98 to be in it, who are pretty much 23 now nearly. And Anton Shun, and with the national team, Anton Shunin, Kudryashov, Semyonov, Mario Fernandez, Zhirkov, Dzyuba, Dupin, Neustadter, and Alexei Yonov are all over the age, either 30 or above. So it is time pretty damn soon that you were going to get that, what we've hoped anyway. I think it's sooner rather than later. Get that transition, and it needs to come fast in my eyes. And I think we need to get, and the worry I have is that we've got a pretty damn good crop of youngsters. Yes, they didn't do great when it comes to results, but they performed very well. They were in a difficult group. And we've got a very promising youngsters, and I feel like we're going to lose this crop because the coaching's not good enough. And unfortunately, that's not a short-term problem. Richard, do you have anything to add on the under-21s?
Yeah, just very, very quickly, I will say that it's so noteworthy, isn't it, with the coaching issues in Russian football at the moment. And, you know, we're already seeing Spartak line up possible replacements for Tedesco, and pretty much all the candidates we're seeing there are coaching candidates from abroad. You know, Zenit are pretty much, if they get rid of Samak either end of this season or they don't renew his contract in the next season, they're going to go foreign again. It's a real worry. And like I say, you wonder, like, if there's ambitious mid-table clubs like Sochi who might go down the foreign coaching route eventually. So yeah, Russian football really has a coaching crisis issue at the minute, and I even think we've got to open up the Pandora's box again about another foreign coach for the Russian national team after Stani, because I've got to be honest, yeah, it's not a good look. And David just mentioned there about, we were talking about it pre-pod, me and you, James, about the under-21s coach of Denmark being a Spaniard. And I think it's even looking like, Russia might have to go for another foreign manager again, maybe even at both senior level and maybe even at under 21s level. Maybe not now with Galatsionov, maybe you might get another young crop to build with, but going forward, yeah, there's just not a lot at the moment, and I really, really hope that this promising young generation of players can break through and can make an impact. And it doesn't. We get this with Russian football, don't we? We get situations where we seem to have promise, and it all looks good, and then we're just disappointed. And I really hope that doesn't happen with this generation. But yeah, the idea of a foreign coach again might not be too far fetched, I must admit.
Yeah, I would like to see more foreign coaches. I mean, I have a broken record when it comes to that, to be honest. David, any last words on the under-21s?
Yeah, I mean, just one final point, which was, we talked about Khvicha earlier, right? He's 20 years old and he's playing in the same league as all of the under-21 squad. Now, I think we could all be pretty much agreed at this stage that Khvicha is probably better than the majority of that under-21 squad that went to the Euros. And that gets us thinking, that got me thinking just now, are we biased towards them? Are we thinking, this squad is really good, when actually we're seeing a foreign player of a similar age outperform them on domestically and internationally? So are we biased? Are we tunnel visioned on this? Are we actually thinking maybe these guys aren't as good as we think? It was I got those opinions from Steve at Scouted, and it was nice. It gave me confidence, thinking, okay, I wasn't mad to think these guys are good, and maybe they are good. Maybe they're not as good as Khvicha, but maybe they are good enough. It was just a rhetorical. Are we being tunnel vision of this when comparing to foreign youngsters in the RPL, which aren't there aren't lots of them, or is it more down to coaching? And even I don't have an answer to that. It was just my internal wonderings there, just coming through.
I'm not sure if anybody has an answer to that. The most worrying thing is I'm not sure if the RFU have an answer to that. Or even more worryingly, I don't even think the RFU sees that as a problem, or sees any problem. They're not exactly gifted with a great amount of foresight, or old forebears in charge of Russian football. Anyway, to discuss away from the apparatchiks at the RFU, and more so the apparatchiks at a former apparatchik at Chertanovo, is that Nikolai Larin, who is the director of Chertanovo and the head of the academy. He's held the role since 2008 and has actually been involved at Chertanovo directly for over 28 years now. Now, just last week, he stepped down from his role, and in quite a very surprising move, which really came out of the blue. We directed Hanu, interviewed Larin himself, and he was very optimistic about the plans for the future, about them getting promoted to the Fina L at the time, and it's really just came out of the blue. And his quote is that he basically, the moment has come when I myself do not really understand what else can be done in terms of the development of Chertanovo. I have no doubt that an arena will soon be built instead of an abandoned building next to the stadium. The mechanism has already been launched, and nothing depends on me in the implementation of this project. Goes on to thank you, all the wonderful people at the club, educators, teachers, and so on. And at the end, he says, I consider this life stage for myself past, and although my heart is still there, I hope I'll be able to regularly come to matches and cheer for the guys. Now, I must admit, it's a very nice statement, very nice club, all the best to Nikolai himself, but whatever he does next. But for me, to be honest, it doesn't quite add up. I'll get to why in a second, but anyway, Larin's been replaced by Ilya Savchenko as the new director of the academy. He previously headed the Smina football school since 2019. And this statement from Larin says that he doesn't know what else he can do for Chertanovo, which that's understandable. He's took them a very, very far distance in 13 years that he's been there. But then immediately after that, he says that he has no doubt a stadium will be built. He has no doubt that the mechanisms that have been launched will continue. He says that the implementation of his project will continue. Well, if he can see that immediately, then why can he not see where he personally can take Chertanovo? At the end, he says, I consider this life stage for myself to have passed. Spending 30 years at one club isn't really a life stage unless he just wants to retire with his family. Totally understandable. But I just feel like there's something more to this statement that he's not. And there's nothing else being said about it either. It's just my time at Chertanovo has gone, fair enough, and left. And no one's really. There's no like scandal here or anything. It just, the statement itself just doesn't really add up. David, do you have any thoughts on this? Do you think it's maybe something to do with the poor form or the Kvaratskhelia spending spree, which took all the players away, or is that just gravy, just really circumstance more than anything?
Well, I don't think that has anything to do with him in particular. Obviously, that's had a more direct impact, obviously, on their form on the pitch, because they're playing with a squad which isn't suitable for this level. But that's not his fault either, really. That's just dependent on the players coming through and the fact that the players they did have there were sold on to fund, and they are a sell to fund project, as we know. It's a little bit strange. I wonder if he'll go on and would we want someone like him working for the RFU in a youth football role, something like that. Like overseeing development, not just for Chertanovo but on a wider role. Well, I wonder if that's on the horizon for him or not, or will he go off and make another school? It was strange. It was a surprise when I heard it. Big surprise. But they've brought in a guy from another who's had experience at other prestigious schools. So maybe he'll be the one to usher in the next generation. Larin's been there so long. Maybe he feels that he's not there with the modern time. I don't know how old this replacement is, Radchenko, but obviously from when Larin started to now, a lot has changed in the world, particularly in the world of football. I mean, the new techniques, the new stuff that goes on behind the scenes in football. A lot of that still, I don't even understand what's going on there. So maybe it was just a case of we need to modernise, and the modernisation needs to start here because you're the one with all the power. So maybe it's a case of just trying to take the club forward, and he didn't have the ability to do so. I don't know if it's mutual, or whether he was pushed, or whether he voluntarily left. You would assume mutual. So yeah, it was a surprise, to say the least. But everything else is just speculation at this point, really. And we'll see how they get on, presumably in the PFL next year, and trying to develop further.
Yeah, that is all it is, speculation at this point. But I do hope that. I mean, Larin's highly rated, and he does things the right way. I like his approach to the game, where when Hannu interviewed him, he mentioned that Chertanovo, first and foremost, was an academy. It was a school. It was about nurturing the players, about getting them ready as men first, as people first, and then as footballers second. And I think that's it's not just in Russia, but across the world. It's a way forwards that more academies should go down. It's far too often these young kids thought of as commodities and cast off and left. And there's an unbelievably good book by Michael Calvin about those who were left on the fringes of society, on the fringes of football society, of when they dropped from the academies. And it's an unbelievable read, and it goes into the psychology of the players and behind the scenes, and treats them as humans, really. And it's all bottom-up perspective. And that thinking from Larin, from at the very top of the club, whether it be, I mean, it might just be lip service, but he seemed very genuine when discussing it. And it's really a good step forward. And I would really like, he's only 48. I would hope that he has left Chertanovo to maybe go into a bigger role in Russian football, because he's really someone that I think the entirety of the country could learn from. I mean, we discuss Chertanovo a lot. We are fans of the work that they do at the club. We are proponents of their methods, but we're not fans of the club. We don't want just that club to do well. It's just the way they do things. They should be held up as a shining light. Richard, have you got any last words on Chertanovo and Larin?
Yeah, just to come in there, about that was an interesting point David made with the RFU. If I was the Russian Football Union, I'd definitely be looking to speak to someone like Nikolai Larin, and especially when Russia's in a situation now where, we've seen with these Euro under-21s when Russia played against the likes of France and Denmark, you can tell the quality of those under-21 sides, especially that French one. They're exposed to a high level of competition every week. The Clairefontaine Academy in France is absolutely exceptional. It nurtured the generation that came through in 1998 that won France the World Cup and really set them on the path to becoming a football superpower. So if someone like Larin is available, and like you said, James, he's only 48 years of age, so he's still got a lot of his working life left ahead of him. I'd certainly, if I was the Russian Football Union, if he's willing to do it, even if it's only on a part-time basis, I'd certainly be willing to get someone like that involved with the Russian Football Union, and because any kind of assets that you can get hold of to help with junior development, to stimulate growth and better performances across all underage groups at under 17, under 19, under 21 level in the country, I think has to be explored. So yeah, if I was the Russian Football Union and Larin was interested, I'd certainly be making an approach to him over the next couple of weeks and months. I'm sure more will come out about Chertanovo in the next couple of weeks and months as well, about why he's decided to move on, but I wish him well in whatever he does. But if I was the Russian Football Union, I'd be certainly making tentative approaches towards him if he's interested.
Yeah, certainly. He needs to stay in the game, whatever happens, hopefully. If he retires and that's what he wants, and for him, good. But for the game, I hope he stays in it and someone does pick him up and higher up in the RPL, no disrespect to Chertanovo or the Finnatel, or even higher than that in the RFU. And that's the end of the Russian Football News podcast this week. Thankfully, we can finally forget about the international break as real football returns again. We've actually got a spate of weekend fixtures with some pretty feisty games coming up. Zenit hosts Khimki, of course, team in great form of late, and Krasnodar Akhmat down the south, Tambov Suska, Ural, Andrew Flint's famous club, host Arsenal. And of course, I want to finish with just congratulating Andrew and his new job as a full-time journalist. Finally, the hard work does pay off, mate. Well done, and congrats on that one. David, thank you for joining me.
Not a problem. Good to be back.
And Richard, thank you very much.
No problem. Pleasure as always.
And everyone, keep an eye out next week because we've got a special edition where the voice of Russian football, a certain Alexei Yarashevsky, commentator of the RPL in English, joins us. But this is the end of the Russian Football News podcast. Goodbye for now.
Идет футбольный матч, летит над полем мяч. Веди его, беги, точнее его ударь. Но мяч берет с ноги решительный вратарь. Не напрасно футбольное поле самых ловких и смелых влечет. Здесь нужны тренировка и воля, быстрота, увлечение, расчет.